up your nose with a twirling lawnmower. Welcome back to Tying That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, and this shaved-haired pretty boy, or shaved-faced pretty boy, Franck, over to my right, which I don't know if that's how our screens are aligned, but right now when I'm talking to you, our screens are aligned where he's to our right, and he's got a handsome Prince Charming face because he shaved because his beard was tickling my balls. And I think that was really thoughtful of him. Hello, Ty. How you doing, buddy?
I'm all right.
Yeah? What are we talking about today? And I
Apparently
chose
your
that
balls.
I chose that quote because there's a political statement in that quote, because I don't like what Freddy Krueger has become later on down the road.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about Nightmare on Elm Street. And I just rewatched the original one. It is such a fantastic horror movie. And what they made out of that, I'm just not a fan of down the road.
Yeah, it became Freddy Krueger went from a wisecracking nightmare demon to this sort of cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to jump ahead of what we got planned or what we got going on, but this one was a grounded sociopath who just had so much fun, which we haven't seen this in a while, tormenting these kids, and he's having a good time and he's laughing, and some of the remarks come from fucking with them, as opposed to the remarks being a vehicle within itself.
Right. Yeah. What you've got is a sociopathic child murderer who has been given free reign to murder children without repercussion. He's having a great time.
Right. Do you remember the first time you saw this movie?
Well, the first one was out early enough that I didn't see it at the theater. I'm pretty sure I saw the first one on like HBO or one of those. The first one that I saw at a theater, I think I saw the third one at a theater.
I'm surprised you got to go see it at the theater.
Well, the third one came out when I was just going to movies whenever I wanted. So I think I saw that one.
I remember when I saw this movie, and I remember because my stepdad's daughter came over, and she was older, like way older, like teenage older, driving older, and I thought she was a hottie. And
yeah, well, that's like half the porn on the internet is like stepsister porn now, right?
Oh, is that? I don't know. I don't watch porn, but I'll take your word for it.
I mean, that's certainly the joke.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I had this smoking hot stepsister. She brought the VHS over of Nightmare on Elm Street. And I mean, I was super young and I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I remember sitting there with my stepsister, my real sister, and then my cousin. And we watched this VHS of Nightmare on Elm Street, and it was everything I wanted in a horror movie. It was scary as fuck. I was sitting next to a smoking hot sister, my smoking hot sister, and it was
this
sexual.
Is like the classic Georgia story, man.
It's the classic Georgia story, but it scared the fuck out of me. And a lot of what I love about horror movies that I think now, like if I try to define it, like what makes this movie special or what I want out of a horror movie, a lot of it I can trace back to this. And the supernatural element and the type of supernatural element really just captured me. If you can remember back on Nightmare on Elm Street, the phenomenon it was before it turned into where it was just a parody of itself, and the conversations at school and all the iconic images and kills and the way that you talked about it, and then it was like a perfect horror film, and it struck at the right time. And there was just a brief, like, I believe, so Wes Craven never wanted to have a sequel of this movie. I believe
and the one huge mistake the movie makes, which was, my understanding, dictated by the studio, is related to his desire not to have a sequel.
Right. And I think, and we'll get to that, but I think that if this movie was made and Wes Craven was in complete control and never made a sequel, it would be that one standalone horror movie that we'd just be like, God damn, that was a fucking, Like this movie was phenomenal. And then I go back and there's a lot of it that still just works so well. I feel like you and Wes Craven have a lot of similarities. And
does he have a short, stubbly beard like that?
He has a short, stubbly beard. He's a huge Burt Reynolds fan. And no, just kidding. But no, Wes Craven was raised in like a real Christian fundamentalist house. His parents and his family were super strict. Yeah. It was rock and roll was bad, cigarettes were bad, drugs were bad, and movies were bad. So he didn't even really watch movies. Definitely didn't watch horror movies.
Yeah.
And so for him to for that guy to write The Last House on the Left, like his mind took a different turn. And so you grew up in a similar environment, and you are like you love horror, and
I do.
The more punk rock, the better. And what's fascinating to me is that Wes Craven, all the way up until Nightmare on Elm Street, he never saw himself or was even interested in horror movies. He didn't really want to be a horror movie director, and he ended up becoming a great editor. And he really got, when he was in college, is when he discovered film, and he was watching all the Fellinis, and he wanted to be that guy. A friend of his that ended up becoming his partner, he was editing stuff for him, and he was like, hey, we should do our own movie. Well, they got all this money together to do this movie, and they wanted to do a scary movie. So like, hey, do you think you can write this movie? And he's like, yeah, I'll write it. And so then in 3 days, he wrote Last House on the Left. They got together. I think it was like a bunch of dentists, like a dentist association, like raised money to make this movie. And they made this movie, and it became a horror movie phenomenon. Did you see, were you like aware of it when it came out, or did you see it
Last
when it
House
came
on the
out?
Left? I didn't, no,
Yeah.
I wasn't, I've since watched it several times. But yeah, no, when it first came out, I didn't know anything about it. I think.
What
I
did you think of it? I don't think I've ever seen it. I saw bits and pieces. Like I saw the girl get raped in the woods.
It's very gritty. It's very like super indie horror, but I think it's an effective movie. It does what it sets out to do. Yeah.
So then he moved to LA, and he fought to like make movies, but he didn't want to do horror. He wanted to do all these other things. And for 5 years, he wasn't able to make anything until his friend came back to him and was like, why don't you just do another scary movie, which he could get money for because Last House on the Left was a phenomenon. So then he did The Hill Has Eyes, and then he did, and I was a fan of Swamp Thing. Did you watch Swamp Thing the original Swamp Thing when it came out?
The Swamp Thing that had my girl Adrienne Barbeau in it? Of course I watched fucking Barbeau. Swamp Thing.
Okay. Because I remember Swamp Thing was on the Superstation rotation, and I remember I remember watching it so much, and I think I recorded it, so I know where all the commercial breaks and everything like that, but I was a big fan of it. So then he made a little bit of money from that, and then he sat down and was like, okay, I'm going to really put my mind, okay, I guess I'm a horror guy, and this is the path I'm taking, so I'm really going to put my mind and create a movie that I really believe in, that I really think is unique and really and special. And he tells this story, and I think this story is terrifying, but the first image that he had is he was a kid, and he was on a street, and it was late at night, and he was like, something drew him to the window. He was looking out the window, and there was a drunk guy walking down the street, and he had a similar sweater, different colors, but similar sweater that Freddy ends up wearing.
Yeah, that striped sweater.
That striped sweater.
Yeah.
And he goes, I don't know what it is, but that guy just sensed me looking at him, and he's walking up the street, and then he stopped, and he looked up at my window, and we made eye contact, and he said, it scared the shit out of me. He got out of view and everything, and that guy was like fascinated by it, and he walked over to the house, and he went and tried to open the door, and the door was locked. Kind of jiggled it. Yeah. And he jiggled a couple times, and it was locked, and then the guy just like, okay, and then walked away. Wow. And he said it terrified him, scared the shit.
That would be scary.
Out of that
would be scary now.
What was he
as an adult? That would be scary
because you're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like what?
Yeah, what was he going to come in and do?
Yeah. Wes said that he feels as if he saw how terrified I was, and it amused him. And he was like going to go get some more out of that. And I'm like, that is so fucked up. And what's interesting is like this whole movie comes out of his subconscious. And then he was reading, there was a series of stories in the LA Times about the Cambodia killing fields. And there was one story that caught his attention about a family. And there was a young kid in their family. He said that every time he fell asleep, that there was a monster trying to kill him. and if that monster ever caught him, he would kill him. So this kid was like going insane because he was making himself stay awake. And they found like a coffee maker machine in he like hid it in his closet. He had like the cord ran and he hid it in his closet. And his parents kept being like, making him sleep. So finally they took him downstairs on the couch next to them, covered him up and made him sleep. He fell asleep. While he was sleeping, he screamed in his sleep. They went over and he died. This poor kid died in his sleep. That's what he tells. That's what Wes tells.
Wow.
And it was in the LA Times, and he tells the story about this kid that died in his sleep. And he got the name Fred Krueger about a bully that terrorized him. His name was Freddy Krueger, that would beat the fuck out of him. And so his name was Fred, and then he took Krueger because he thought the Krueger sounded German or whatever. So what's interesting about this movie is like it all came from his subconscious. And he said, once I read that article, everything came together. The drunk that scared me on the street when I was a kid, the guy that used to bully me, this kid who's afraid to go to sleep and why he can't sleep. And he said, and within that, I was thinking about what would his weapon be? What was his tools be? And he was like, his cat would go up on the chair and like paw the chair. And he was like, fucking claws. Like, that's it. Like I'm going to give him claws or whatever, this whole thing. And I did a list of like, what do I think makes this movie special? Because going back and watching this and being even now, like loving this movie so much. And I'm like, what is it about this movie that makes it special? And I think one, the dream territory, because, and I think up until this point, I mean, Dreamscape, I think was before this, right? Or would no?
No, Dreamscape came after this. This movie came out in the early 80s. Was
there any Dream movie before this?
Oh, I'm sure there was. I'm sure there's. Yeah, I mean, there's been Dream movies. I'm trying to think of specifics, but I have a very strong memory of having seen horror in like Italian horror movies from like the 70s. So, I mean, I think the idea of a monster hunting you in your dreams, it's not original to Nightmare on Elm Street, but this particular version of it felt very original the first time you watch it.
For me, I think that I've never seen this before. As a kid, I'd never seen anything to do with dreams before. But to me, as a kid, like the dreaming realm is where I felt most vulnerable. Like I hated at night going to bed and closing my eyes and losing consciousness because I'm like, fucking, if somebody breaks in my house, like that feeling of like being helpless, like unconscious, right?
Yep.
And then when you're sleeping, it's like you're 1 foot in the spirit world and 1 foot in the real world. And there's always, if you have a nightmare, when you wake up, it takes you a second to be like, oh, that's not real. It's a nightmare. And so like that playing with your sanity and you being the most vulnerable.
I think, and maybe this is, I don't want to get too psychological, but maybe this is part of why the movie worked for you so well. Because this is a common thing. Kids who grow up feeling unsafe. And that can be for a variety of reasons. I mean, like, even as simple as like, your parents get divorced when you're a kid. And so you feel like there's no safety. There's no like consistency to your life. Or kids who are beaten or abused. Kids, like that kind of stuff. There is a psychology that comes out of feeling unsafe when you're a child that I think a lot of people have. And that feeling of, if I go to sleep, somebody might come in and hurt me is very common to that sort of thing. As a kid, when I got to the age where I could like actually use like tools, one of the first things I did is I put a lock on the inside of my door. That like,
oh, interesting.
When I closed my door, I had this little thing that I could flip over and it would latch. And the door could not be opened from the outside.
Your parents would let you do that?
I just did it. And then they never really brought it up, but yeah, right. I just did it.
Yeah. You like your own door.
It's not uncommon for people who feel unsafe when they're children to have that sort of reaction to like, when I'm asleep, I'm vulnerable. Somebody could come hurt me. So I think what my Nightmare on Elm Street does so effectively is it like literalizes that fear. Right. I mean, that is literally what is happening is you fall asleep and somebody's going to come hurt you.
And also it puts a ticking clock on, because you're going to have to go to sleep.
Right.
And so
you can't avoid that forever.
You can't avoid that forever. And so it was like this hopelessness where they were in the movie when they realized that they were being terrorized by their dreams. that they're taking no dose and like coffee, and it's like that, eventually you're gonna go to sleep and it's coming for you.
It's the same. It's the same ticking clock that Invasion of the Body Snatchers has. Where it's like you can avoid being taken over until you fall asleep, but you are, no matter what you do, you're going to fall asleep. And I don't know if Wes Craven was deliberately borrowing from that, but some of the scary scenes in Nightmare on Elm Street feel like some of the same moments from Invasion of the Body Snatchers, because there is a scene in Invasion where they know that falling asleep is when the aliens replicate you, right? They know that. And so they're trying not to fall asleep, and then they lose track of one of their group and realize that he has fallen asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, fuck, right? And I think that sort of scene happens a couple of times in Nightmare where, we know they're trying to stay awake, and you see the inside the person's head. They think they're awake, and then you see them from the outside and you realize they're sleeping.
So thematically, like the thematics are the realm, like the struggle between sanity and insanity, right? And so the longer that they stay awake, the more they weaken themselves so they can buy themselves time, but then they start to become unreliable in their sense of like, is this real? Is this not real?
Yeah.
They start to hallucinate, and they're like,
you start having waking dreams,
and they're closer to the mystical realm. The more like out of it they are, the more the staying up it is. So like the thing that, and also another thematic is like the sins of your fathers, the sins of your parents being visited on you, and so
that's very
there
biblical.
Is very biblical.
The sins of the parents will be visited upon their children.
Which is one of like Wes Craven's. He has a lot of these biblical themes because he was like you. He was raised in this biblical. Like you, he hates God now, and so he has like this like.
I hate God the same way that I hate Santa Claus.
and then I think too, like the story behind Freddy, the lure, the mystery, where the sequence of like her having this reoccurring dream, she's finding out her friend Tina's having this reoccurring dream. And so the mystery being like, why is this recurring dream there? Then falling into it has something to do with her parents. And then her parents then confess who this guy is, but her parents don't believe. So it's like that whole, and that terrifies me too, is that the logic of her really starting to grasp the situation, but the more she starts to grasp it, the less people believe her. And that's a terrible feeling.
That is part of the genius of the world building, is there's no way to prove that it's happening, right? Like if a psycho killer in real life breaks into your house and tries to kill you with a chainsaw, and you survive and he gets away, you can call the cops and there will be a lot of evidence. Look, my front door was chainsawed open. Like there's rubble all over the floor. Like there's chainsaw cuts in my wall. Even if the person's not there, the cops are going to believe that something happened, right?
Right.
The problem for these guys is they come out of these dreams like, somebody tried to kill me in my dream. Everybody's like, yeah, sure. Because what possible proof can you have?
Right. And I feel like too, Nancy, I think, is a fantastic protagonist. I think that she is the final girl all the way through. Like her arc is not her discovering her courage or being heroic. You always talk about like one of your favorite protagonists in a horror movie, somebody that makes the smart decision.
Yep.
Every step of the way. So she's always smart. She's always resourceful. She's always active. But her arc is really, she allows her parents to control her. And even though she knows like there's some, like Rod did not kill Tina. I don't believe this. I think this has something to do with God that's haunting our dreams. I know it's crazy, but these are the things. And her parents are like, they don't believe her, and they're like, just go to your room, go to sleep. So her obeying her parents until she ultimately stands up and defies her mother is like, I think that is her arc, not the typical arc of like discovering your courage or discovering your strength throughout the whole thing. She's always strong.
I agree with that, but I also think there's another aspect to it, which is her arc is that she starts out trying to find people to help her, trying to find people to save her, and gets to the point where she goes, the only person that's going to save me is me. So that's kind of part of that arc, is She tries to get her parents to help her. They don't. She tries to get other people to help her. They don't.
She tries to get her boyfriend to help her.
Tries to get her boyfriend to help her.
And he fucking fell asleep. She like lays into him. She's like, "You fucking bastard. I just wanted you to do one goddamn thing. And you fell asleep."
So at some point she crosses over to, "Oh, okay, I get it. What I got to do is I got to save myself."
Right.
And that's ultimately what the end of the movie is.
They do something here. They do the kind of the Janet Leigh and Psycho thing where you have Tina who sets the movie up and you're like, okay, this is the protagonist. Right. This is the person who the movie's going to be about. And then when Freddy is stalking her and you think that Nancy and them are going to be the supporting cast, the friends and all this.
Yep.
And so when they kill Tina, I think the most terrifying kill in this movie, and I think the movie doesn't really quite even catch up to this first moment, is when Tina is killed in front of Rod, you know? And
it is the most terrifying moment.
Yeah, and it reminds me of The Exorcist. It has there's a lot of things in this movie that reminds me of The Exorcist.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that, like me, one of the first things Wes Craven did when he got out of his fundy household is watch The Exorcist. Because when you grow up in a fundy household, you are told that that's the most evil movie ever made. If you're a Christian and you watch it, you're inviting demons into your soul, all this stuff, right? So when you get out of it, you're like, I'm going to watch me some fucking Exorcist. I bet he did the same thing.
It should be the most poignant movie against good and evil, you know, or, you know, the battle between good and evil, the ancient thing, right. You know, if that's what I don't know why they would think that's the evil movie, but the fact she was climbing up the wall and floating in space, the fact that the contrast between the first kill, how advanced and crazy and spectacular was, to the last kill, where it's like that weird skeleton that gets just dissolves in the bed. It's like, you know, I don't know if you spent all your budget on the first kill and then you just did I mean,
that's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
The other thing that they did cleverly with Tina is Tina looks like the protagonist in the 80s. She's pretty. She's blonde. If you're watching a movie in the 80s and that character shows up, she's the main character because she's the pretty blonde girl. And Heather Langenkamp, who I had a huge crush on when I was a kid, so I'm not bashing her looks at all. I think she's super cute. She looks like the friend. She's kind of mousy. She's got the frizzy brown hair. She doesn't look like the classic main girl that we in cinema expected at the time. So I think casting is also part of how they trick you.
I was extremely attracted to her.
Heather Langenkamp is super cute. Yeah, I'm not bashing her looks at all. I'm just saying,
and she's got a nice body. I don't want to be chauvinist, but
no. But my point isn't that Heather Langenkamp isn't attractive, because she absolutely is. My point is that there is a certain style of attractive that we associate.
I understand what you're saying.
Main character, right?
And also, she was very Midwest. She was very wholesome. She did not have that fake Midwest that Hollywood actresses oh, I'm Midwest now. It oozed out of her. And all the interviews and everything I see, she's very grounded, down to earth. I've heard from multiple, she's a wonderful person, just a really great person. And that comes across, you know, in the film. And she doesn't make those horror movie sins, right? Her friend Tina goes up and bangs and she doesn't have sex. She doesn't do any of those things going forward. But another thing for me, it was the first time I've seen anybody like Freddy Krueger. I think Robert Englund does a great job. Fresh off V, he was riding a high horse, comes in, auditions for this. And I think he was in a hiatus during seasons between V. Or was V a miniseries? V was just a miniseries, right?
Initially, it was a miniseries, and then they tried to turn it into a show. Yeah,
I see. So either he did it, he already did a season because he was it was the most kind of. He said he's been doing movies all through the 70s. Yep. He did V, that was his big kind of thing, and then he felt really good going into the audition for Freddy Krueger. He said he took cigarette ashes and put it under his eyes and stared at Wes Craven and got this thing, but. I think this version of him, because each death scene or each thing is almost like sex, right? You could tell he gets off on the to freak him out. And when they come into his realm where he has complete power, it's almost like he was killed by the parents, and then he kind of woke up in this dream and was like, oh shit, I got all this power. Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to fucking torture their kids, and I'm going to go in their dreams. And when they come in their dreams, it's like he savors this control over them, because it's like he tips into their subconscious, so he knows what scares them and how it grosses them out. And he does shit like when Tina first like makes eye contact when he sees him, he like holds up his hands and cuts his 3 fingers off and is like, ah, and just like looking at her, just enjoying, and he cuts his body open, and he like fucks with her, you know, and then he fucks with him until it's like, okay, now it's time to have sex, and then he kills her, you know.
You know, he's obviously a psychopath, but he's in a place now where he doesn't have to rush. He can't be caught. He can't be arrested. He can't be killed, he thinks. He can do anything he wants, so he's not rushing. He can take his time. He can savor the moment. He can enjoy it. You know, he get all the psychopathic pleasure of it. Yeah, and you see him doing that. And when, you know, like, because Nancy gets away a few times early on, and he's fine with that, because he knows he's going to get her back. He doesn't care.
Like, even with Tina, he kind of, like, the first time, he almost kind of allows it. I think he wants a couple of dreams to torment him, and then kind of let them get away, because the torture they're going to have in their life after that, of knowing this thing is with him and then he can't stop him, is something that he also gets off on
this. He doesn't get off on the death. He gets off on the suffering. So the longer he can make them suffer, the more joy he gets out of it.
Exactly. And I think that's adds to the terror. You know, in Dance Macabre, where Stephen King talks about the 3 different types of horror, where you have like the dread, you have the terror, and you have the gross out, you know? And so this one, like, for me, the dread and the terror is way more interesting than the actual kills.
Right.
You know, and if you think about like the original, what people forget about is like the original Halloween. Even this movie, there wasn't many kills in this movie. No. Or, you know, you think the original Halloween, there's not a lot of kills in Halloween. And so, you know, when Tina is murdered, which is absolutely terrifying, then the next day she's going to school, and then she runs into Rod. And again, it's like that line between, I'm not crazy, I'm not cuckoo, I didn't do this thing. And she believes him. And then what was the thing is, like, which I was like, her father kind of pops out of the bushes and she's like, you used me. Like, did he use her as like let's just follow my daughter on her way to school? And I think Rod will try to contact her. Is that what happened?
I think that's what they're implying. Yeah. That she was bait.
That's kind of fucked up. I think, by the way, let's talk about how fucked up those parents are. John Saxon. John Saxon was that guy.
The famous John Saxon. I love him.
And John Saxon has a great
he got in a karate fight with Bruce Lee. Once you've been in a karate fight with Bruce Lee, you're a fucking badass from then on.
Well, what's interesting is you got John Saxon, who was like you said, a guy that got in a karate fight with Bruce Lee, who kind of has like this leading man heroic vibe on screen. And he's the sheriff.
Well, he also played bad guys quite a lot. So he has that sort of, he can play the leading man, but he also can play sinister.
That sinister thing.
Yeah, he has that
in this movie, when you see him, you're like, oh, we're safe now, because John Saxon is the sheriff, and this is his little girl, and he's going to look after her. And then his mom, Ronnie Blakey, who was kind of like a boozer, who was like drunk the whole movie. What pisses me off about this movie is when they're leaving the funeral of Rod, and Nancy's like, it's a dream. There's a guy named Freddy Krueger with these fucking claws, and he's killing these people. They look at each other. They know they killed a man named Freddy Krueger, and they burned him to death. And and their daughter just completely described him. And
they're like, no, it can't be that.
And then they're like, shut up, just go to sleep. And she's like, I can't go to sleep. This is where he's killing people, right? And then even when poor Johnny Depp, right? And we could talk a little bit about that kill. And the kills were creative. They're really interesting, right? It like defied all the kills. But Johnny Depp gets sucked into a bed, and then it's like the Kill Bill like blood just pouring through the bed. I mean, it is like red rum coming, the fountain of blood just pouring, and it's a really cool, like visual, cool death. The dad comes in and he's like almost pukes, you know, and it's not like, okay, Johnny Depp was pulled to the center of a bed and then there was a geyser of blood that shot on the ceiling around the walls. He wasn't like, maybe something weird's going on.
Clearly, this is this must be the work of a local psycho, because that's how psychos do. They put you in a blender.
Yeah, and then maybe my little girl who's never been crazy, who's never done anything crazy, who's having dreams about a person that we did kill,
who's
and then
describing the person we murdered.
Yeah, and how we murdered him. And then the mother is like, okay, all right, come here, sweetie. Let me show you in the boiler room downstairs. First of all, why are you keeping the glove of razors that he used to torture little kids? As a thing. Yeah, what is that about?
We don't want to get rid of this.
Oh, what we forgot is that she went like the Exorcist. They took her to get studied while she's sleeping. Right? She's sleeping in the bed. She sees him sleeping in the bed. She wakes up from a dream. Her heart's going crazy, everything like that. She's cut, and she has a fucking hat that says Freddy Krueger in the hat.
Right. No, that's all just coincidence.
Let's just go up. Like, if I was a sleep scientist, I'm like, no, we need to figure this out. We need to get down. Like, I've never seen any shit like this. We need to figure this out. But the mother's like, okay, I know what to do. Come here, sweetie. Here's his claws and whatever. We did kill a guy named Freddy Krueger. He did wear a hat and claws and everything, but he's dead now. So go to sleep. I need you to go to sleep, and here's some sleeping pills. And she's like, I can't fucking sleep. It's like she's being gaslit by her mother.
Yeah,
in that thing.
It is. I mean, I love this movie, so I'm not bashing the movie at all. I love this movie, but it is the weirdest part of the movie, how obtuse they are to all the, yes, okay, something that happens in a dream, you can't prove it because it's like a dream. But as you said, you've been cut. You have a fucking hat in your hand that has that dude's name on it. You're describing
you burned to death.
That and your kid is describing to you a person that you killed. You burned them to death. That the kid would have no way to know about. Like, you're not going to take a minute and go, maybe some shit is happening here that's, unreasonable. I'm a reasonable man, but I've seen some real unreasonable shit lately.
This is not nitpicking, because I think this movie's making a point that the mother is so cut off from reality, and she's, buried herself in the bottle. It's implied the reason that they didn't work as a marriage is like, this thing has destroyed them, right? Yeah. Even though Freddy Krueger should have died, it destroyed the town. Even though Freddy Krueger should have died, that mob mentality is having effect on their psychology.
Well, and they have this shared dark secret, this shared guilt that they're all trying to hide from. Yeah.
And so the mother is avoiding trauma, not knowing that she's pushing her daughter towards Freddy. And so, like, I think it's actually really well in the design. And also, it's at a time when these movies were coming out where, like, the parents did not understand you. The parents did not get you. And that adds to the paranoia.
That's
because
very
at that
80s.
point, very 80s and 70s and 60s, I don't know what the cultural movies are today. I don't feel like we had a shared culture as we did it at one time. I mean, I guess Get Out would be like the most shared cultural moment where we all were into the movie, we discussed it, talked. Anyway, so then she has to take it upon herself, right? She's like, her mother is so buried in the bottle, so refusing to deal with the trauma, deal with the past. She's unreliable, and I got to defend on myself and my dipshit boyfriend that keeps forgetting me to wake up. By the way, let's have a little conversation about Johnny Depp. There was a, Wes Craven said he was down to 3 guys, and he was watching the tapes. He said his daughter and his friends were somehow in the room or kind of around while he's watching the tapes. And he said he was leaning towards another guy who was a name, and Johnny Depp didn't do anything at that point. He's like, what do you think? I think I'm going to get this other guy. And all the girls were like, no, go to Johnny Depp. You should cast Johnny Depp.
He was so pretty back then.
He was a handsome guy. But what's interesting about Depp in this film is that he's hiding from the camera. There is a humility in his performance and a shyness. So you can, when somebody's doing, like, acting for the first time, or their scenes or whatever, sometimes they look away from the camera. They hide them face for the camera. They don't subconsciously hide from the camera. And Depp does that. If you watch him, he's not fully confident in his performance. He's not fully confident, which really works for the character and works for the brother. But it's almost, and they talk about how hard he worked on it, but it's almost like he channeled, sometimes people that are shy or have a hard time with that energy makes them the best actors, because they have this energy and they really create something. Whereas sometimes people are like, look at me, la 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 la, and just like thrives on being the center of attention.
Yep.
Sometimes that is not as interesting as somebody that's withholding from the camera, of like not giving all of themselves, Yep. And so I think, Johnny Depp, obviously, who was playing like kind of a milquetoast part and everything like that, but he was interesting in the film. I don't know if you would have looked at that and been like, oh, this guy's going to be an international superstar, but you would look at that and be like, he's more interesting than the typical guy that plays this part, the typical guy that does this,
Yeah. I agree.
And all that. But now, one of my favorite thing in horror movies, and I think so number one, the sleep thing terrifies me. Is where I feel most vulnerable. I don't like being unconscious and not knowing what that threat is. The 1 foot in the spirit world, 1 foot out spirit world. But what I love, and what I think this movie did so well, and if Wes Craven would have had his initial vision and not been compromised, that this would have been one of the great horror movies of all time, which it still is her taking the agency and flipping the tables. Like, even though like those booby traps, like she read a book in like 30 minutes and was like, even all that, like I fucking loved that she was like, she went to sleep and was like, woke up and was like, I'm going to get this motherfucker. And she went looking for Freddy. Because
she knows that if she doesn't if she's not proactive, to use a buzzword, she's just going to die. She knows. And so she's like, well, if you're coming at me to kill me and there's no way for me to escape, I'm at least going to fight. Like, you might still kill me, but I'm going to go down swinging, And it is an attitude that we as humans instinctively admire, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That if you're being chased by the guy with the knife and you run out of places to run to, and there's no way you can escape, and he's behind you, he's got the knife, he's coming at you. There's two versions. There's the one where you just curl up on the ground and beg for your life and get stabbed and die. And there's a version where, like, you got a knife, I don't, you're probably going to win, but I'm going to take a swing and see what happens, and we automatically admire the second one.
But it's even more hopeful or more calculated than I'm just going to take a Hail Mary. It's like, I think I got something.
Yeah.
I think I got something, and I'm in her, in that dream, she had the confidence to go after Freddy and find him, which really gets me fired up. And when she goes after Freddy and brings him back in the real world, she then flips the script, which I love in horror movies, where now he's in her world and she's fucking him up with all
he's no longer invulnerable.
He's not longer invulnerable, and he's feeling pain. And she's fucking burning him and like busting shit over his head, and like she's one step ahead of him, and he gets hit in the fucking chest with the sledgehammer. And those things I loved. And then the anticipation of her trying to get her dad, and these fucking cops, like, she's like kicking windows out of her fucking house and saying, he's in here. He's like, huh? What? Maybe I should go get your pa.
Yeah.
And then he goes,
hey, John Saxon, your daughter's screaming bloody murder in your house. He's like, yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's like, oh, by the way, there's a serial killer that's been crazy murdering these people, and geysers of blood are in this room. Your daughter's screaming. He's in the house. Yep. And I'm like, and they kept being like,
I'm busy over here. I'm doing
crazy
stuff.
Teenagers. She must have had a bad dream. Yeah. And so when John Saxon comes over, the anticipation of like, now he gets to fucking see this guy that he murdered, this little girl that he didn't believe. And then I was really curious about the confrontation between him and Freddy, right?
Right.
This is where the movie takes one turn that I don't like.
Yes, this is where it starts making mistakes. Yep.
I think it violates its own rules that it's set up because, Freddy's on top of his mother, which that's all fine and good, but he disappears. He's kind of like, he's a part of that dream thing that doesn't really make sense. And then I don't even care if it's the 80s. You have all these kills up until this point that are fucking phenomenal. You know, the first kill of Tina, phenomenal. Sucking Johnny Depp in the bed, blood geysers, phenomenal.
Yep.
Even the fucking choking in the hanging of Rod in the jail, phenomenal. And now you like stole somebody's Halloween decoration and you have it lowering down in the bed as it raises up its hand, and then Freddy's disappeared, and you don't get the satisfaction of John Saxton seeing Freddy. Right. And what that could have been, that was what I think is the first mistake.
Yes.
Or one of the big mistakes.
And it is my understanding, and I could be wrong because I'm not a film historian and I haven't done a super deep amount of research on this, but the story I've read is that the studio absolutely wanted to turn this into a franchise and wanted to set up the possibility of sequels. And the weird decisions at the end of the movie are driven by that.
To me, what wins it back is when Freddy Krueger's not there, she knows he's there. And when she turns her back on Freddy Krueger in that moment, and she's like, basically she looks and she's like, I take away all the power I've ever given you, and you have no power over me, and turns her back. That is one of my most satisfying moments in horror film history. I love it. It's fucking great. This thing that terrorized me for 2 hours and scared the shit out of me, and invades your dream and seems to be invincible and all this stuff. And then she's like, fuck you. And she doesn't have fear of him, and he loses all of his power. I think it's fucking great. Then
I mean, it could have been set up better. That is my problem with that moment.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
If there had been any hint that the demon is powered by fear, that's what he's actually eating is the fear, not the murder, that he needed the fear, then I think that moment would land a little better. That's nitpick. It's a nitpick.
Well, I think in hindsight, when I go back and think about it, I think it makes sense because he doesn't just show up and kill these people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I even said that earlier.
He shows up and terrifies them.
That's right.
And that terrifying them, it almost makes him powerful. They give him the power to then kill them.
Yep.
And so I think in that way, it works in that way. Now, how it was originally written is she walks through the door, her mother's there. You can tell that there's something otherworldly. It's almost a dream. Her old friends are there. You know, what are they doing there? Is this all a dream? Is this whatever? She sees them. She's like, bye, Mom. She gets in the car, and it's almost Leave It to Beaver enough where you know it's a dream, and then it ends right there, right? Yep. So you're left with, was that a dream? What? Yes. That's fascinating.
Yes.
And to go what you're discussing, go ahead.
Yep.
You go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I agree, because that's the big moment in Inception, right? Is that the big story plot of Inception is once you've been living in the dreams, how will you ever know when you're not in the dream? How will you ever know? And that's where that version of the story leaves Nancy is, will you ever trust that you're awake again because of the experience that you've had? And that's fascinating, and it's terrifying. So it's a great ending.
If it ended that way, then you question the whole logic of the movie. What is this, and where was that, and is this a dream? How is this? And yep. It's scarier to me that it's ending on such a Blue Velvet tone, yep. positive note, that's way more eerier than what Bob Shea made them do,
right?
Which is pull a blow up doll through the window of the door.
It's such a terrible moment. It doesn't fit with anything that came before. It comes out of left field. It's a terrible effect, so it looks laughable. And then the Freddy Krueger colored top to the convertible and all of that. It's just the whole that last 15 seconds is so bad. It's like shockingly bad. And when you think about it compared to the version he wanted to do, and how great that version is, and how eerie that would have been, and how unsettling it would have been to have her go out and you, the audience, and they go, wait, are you still in a fucking dream right now? Is that what's happening? It's, it's the Leonardo DiCaprio going out of the house to greet his children at the end of Inception. You're like, are those real? Are those actually his kids out there? Like,
right.
That is much eerier than, like, oh no, the blow up doll got yanked through the window.
Yeah. So now go back and imagine you watching Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time. Imagine her turning her back on Freddy. Freddy loses the power. She comes out, and it's this bucolic dream.
Yep.
All of her friends are alive. She gets in the car and she drives away, and the movie ends there. And there was no sequel.
It would be such a powerful ending.
It would be
It'd
like
be so creepy.
You and I would be talking all the time, like, you remember that fucking movie Nightmare on Elm Street? How great that movie was. Came out of nowhere. It was this great fucking movie, but
they threw that amazing ending away for a series of increasingly bad sequels.
And the thing is, I feel as if they could still do the sequels. Why ruin this masterpiece and just go do the sequel? You could still come up and do the sequels. You don't need to set up the sequels.
Because studio wonks do not fucking understand story. They don't.
Yeah.
They don't get it.
It undermined what the whole movie created. It undermined the whole thing in like the last 2 minutes.
They threw the whole thing away for one terrible moment at the end.
Right.
Yeah. That kind of stuff drives me nuts.
But I want to end on a high note because I think Nightmare on Elm Street is a special horror movie. I think it's phenomenal. I don't even remember the sequels. I think I think Dream Warriors are kind of cool, but I don't even remember any other stuff because I liked the first one so much that maybe if I did watch it, I don't know, but I don't have any desire to rewatch any of those things.
Did one amazing thing. Dream Warriors led to one of the best episodes of The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, where Treehouse of Horror does a Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors episode, and it's fucking great. It's 10 minutes of awesomeness.
What's our top 5, Joseph?
Well, we have top 80s horror villains.
80s horror villains.
Yep.
So this is like franchise villains or just...
It wasn't really specified for the patrons when they developed the pool.
I think it could just be horror villains. But here's the thing. I know that you and I will agree on this because Freddy Krueger terrified me, and for the same reasons, Pinhead endlessly fascinates me and endlessly terrorizes me. Pinhead scares the fuck out of me.
Pinhead was the one I was immediately going to go to. I think the original Hellraiser is, it's held back by absolutely no budget at all. So there's some goofy looking moments just because of the budget. Mm-hmm. But Doug Bradley, who plays Pinhead, does an astonishing job as as Pinhead. The world building of it, the idea of it is so fascinating to me.
The world building, but the something about Pinhead, and that, like over all the other demons, there's something about Pinhead where it's like where he exists in a realm where you're like, there's nothing I can do. Like as soon as you open that box, you're fucked. You're fucked. Like Pinhead is in charge.
That's the joke version of this. Remember, there was I remember when Grindhouse came out and it had Planet Terror and it had Death Proof, and then in between the two movies there were a bunch of fake commercials.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those fake commercials was the horror movie where people are saying no, like I'm not going to do the thing, like
don't.
Hey, yeah, do you want to come? Hey, a bunch of us girls are going to go use this Ouija board in that haunted insane asylum. Are you coming? No, that doesn't sound fun at all. I'm not doing that. Right. The joke version is like, if you're walking through the world and you run into a little strange puzzle box just laying on the ground and you hear ghostly whispers, you just pick it up, you put it in a safe, you lock that safe, you take that safe out on your boat, you throw the safe in the ocean.
Yeah.
and then you go on with your life.
No, first you dry it in a cement block. And then you throw it in the ocean.
Yes. You throw it in the safe, you fill the safe with cement, you throw the safe in the ocean, and then you go have a normal, happy life.
So, I'm going to do a hot take on this.
Okay, go ahead.
You go ahead. I
was going to say Michael Myers, obviously. Yes. Michael Myers created the slasher movie villain. He created it.
And again, the thing I love most is a great backstory and mystery to that person. And they talk about the half man, and the half man is the guy that basically puts the monster into context, just like Quint from Jaws is like, let me tell you about this shark. I'm going to go after the shark. Well, when what's his name, the psychiatrist, what's his name in
Loomis, Dr. Loomis.
When Loomis talks about looking to his eyes, to me, it's not as good, but it's like the looking into a shark's eyes, a doll's eyes, a doll's eyes. But when he says looking into the depth of insanity and evil and ancient evil, and when he looks into Mike Myers' eyes, so there's a great half. That would be a good top 5. The best half man, the monster's hype man, you know. But him setting up Mike Myers, like, if it wasn't for Loomis and if it wasn't for that speech, Mike Myers would not be as interesting as he is, because once he does that speech and then you see him, especially like when
every time you see him, you're waiting for something to happen.
Yes. Yeah. And
because
it
Loomis.
just makes it so spooky. So, but for this reason, and this is going to be a hot take because everybody's going to think that I'm going to say the Queen in Alien is going to be, well, now the thing is like the Queen in the Alien is like one of the greatest monster designs. How it looks, all of its rules and powers and everything, I think is fantastic. But for me, I'm more into the half man speech that gives me the story behind the thing. And so the alien is like the perfect killing machine, but it's not going to come ahead of Mike Myers or Freddy Krueger or Pinhead.
No, and it's also the alien is not a villain. The alien is a creature living its biology.
Yeah.
That, like, I mean, like when a shark comes to bite you, it's not the villain. It's just a shark. It just eats stuff, and you just happen to be there, right? And the aliens are kind of like that. This is just how their life cycle goes. They don't have any malice. For me to be a truly great villain, you have to have malice. Pinhead wants to torture you to death. He thinks that's awesome.
That's why Jurassic Park never really works on me, because they're just dinosaurs being dinosaurs.
They're just being dinosaurs.
Yeah, they're just being dinosaurs. That's not as scary as like you open a demon box and now you're in his world now, motherfucker.
Now Pinhead shows up.
Yeah, Pinhead shows up.
And he's all like,
it's over with.
Wes, I have such sights to show you.
Oh my
and you're
God.
like, I'm getting pulled apart with fish hooks now.
Pinhead, I did not open that box.
You don't need to know any of the stuff Pinhead wants to show you. Now, I will say, I think both the first movie and the remake they did recently of Candyman are great.
Oh,
they are two different movies, and they are telling two different stories or two different versions of the story, but I think they're both equally awesome.
Tight. We are two peas in a pod. I thought that Candyman would be an argument on my part. I was saying why I'm not choosing Alien to then set up Candyman. Candyman scared the piss out of me. I remember seeing it in theater, and part of the reason it scared the piss out of me is the backstory about him being like covered in honey and bees and tarred and feather and like all that shit.
Hands sawed off and
and all that torture that he went through, and he's driven insane by revenge and Candyman is a sleeper. Like that movie is a phenomenal, scary fucking movie, and he's one of my favorite villains. So
it's also the movie that made me fall in love with Virginia Madsen. She's great in it. She's fantastic in that movie.
She is great.
Tony Todd is a giant in genre film. Tony Todd has done so much great genre film, and he's always a presence. You know, because he's so tall and he's got that gravelly voice and he's got that intimidating presence. Yeah, he's got that intimidating presence. When he shows up, whenever I'm watching a movie and Tony Todd shows up, I know some shit about to pop up. Yeah. So Candyman for me is one of the great villains.
You know, and so just as much as I like Mike Myers, I've never been a Jason guy. I'm not
a Jason guy either. Jason has no personality.
Yeah. And Jason is a derivative, right? It's like those movies are hitting beats that they got from other movies. And so it doesn't have the power of the first thing or whatever like that.
Yeah.
I would have to say on this list, because Annie Wilkes, she kind of, I love Misery, love Stephen King. She's a fascinating character, complex. You know, she has this bipolar thing about, and what I love about the novel and the movie is she does things within the symptoms of like being a manic bipolar personality, but they don't spell it out. They don't hit you in the head with it. It's like, it's just, it's very subtle and everything like that. But I would not put her in my top 5 because
I wouldn't. No, I think Misery is a fantastic movie. I think Annie Wilkes is an incredibly interesting character.
She's not fascinating to me. And Chucky, I've never really been that into Chucky because
I
like,
can't stand the Chucky movies.
I can't stand it. He's
I
like,
don't,
you know,
I don't understand those movies at all.
I don't get it. I don't fucking get it. You know, it's like what you remember when you go, I will fuck up a kid.
Right?
Like, how much more can you fuck up a doll? You know, like a little doll. Like, I would take that knife and shove it up that doll's ass. Love Cujo, but again, Cujo is just a dog with rabies.
It's just a dog with rabies. I feel bad.
I'd probably say Francis on Manhunter is probably the next for my. Oh, I don't know, John Ryder on Hitcher.
Now, here's my question for you. Then, is Francis Dollarhide more scary than Buffalo Bill?
No, I don't think so.
Because I think Buffalo.
I don't think so.
Francis is more physically intimidating, but Buffalo Bill scares the shit out of me because Buffalo Bill is just a fucking nut job.
I don't even think Francis is. I mean, he's like bigger and all that. Buffalo Bill, to me, how sick he is. He puts his lotions on the skin and like his dog in the rib and then like the thing when he tucks his...
and then pulling his little nipple piercing, he goes, "Did you fuck me? I'd fuck me."
Yeah,
you're just like, God damn, dude.
And he does the tuck between his legs and all that
doing
shit.
The dancing around with the tuck and pulling on his nipples and talking about how, you know, would you fuck me? I'd fuck me. Like okay, so you know, you talk about you walk in the room, you see the demon box on the bed. What do? I walk into a room, a man's got a tuck, he's dancing around with a tuck, he's pulling on his nipples and saying, "Would you fuck me?" I am getting on a fucking airplane and flying to another continent at that point.
Oh, Jack Torrance?
I don't know. Jack Torrance never struck me as a villain. I feel bad for Jack Torrance.
Yeah, I think you're right. He doesn't really go with the. He doesn't.
But I would definitely put Buffalo Bill
John
on
Ryder
the list.
Wait, is that 80s?
No.
Oh no, you're right. It's not 80s. You're right. It's not.
Yeah.
It's after that. It's 90s. You're right.
I like John Ryder because he's, like you guys pointed out, he's almost supernatural.
He's super. Yeah, he feels
unstoppable. He's just. He's a presence and.
Yeah.
Is that our number 5?
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
And Leatherface is 70s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 70s.
Unfortunately.
I'm trying to think. Is there another? Did we miss somebody? Did we miss?
Man, I always like Pumpkinhead just for the character, like the design of the monster, and obviously it had
but
Lance.
You know this list works for me.
So our patron top 5, as you can see, I did split it up because I didn't know, if you guys were gonna consider humans, but top 5, I think they did pretty good.
Well, they got 3 out of 5, which is what they always get. The
know
patrons
us.
60% know us.
They 60% know us.
Yep. It's really consistent too. It's really consistent.
I feel 60% seen. What do you
I
feel,
do too.
Ty?
I feel like they've seen 60% of me.
Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Please like and subscribe. Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.